In the vastness of interstellar space, where countless species had risen and fallen across millennia, one truth remained constant: the strong survived, and the weak perished. This fundamental law of existence had been codified into a galactic hierarchy, with each species assigned its place according to demonstrated power. And at the apex of this hierarchy stood the Thanril, the supreme hunters of the cosmos. The Thanril were not merely feared. They were revered with an almost religious awe. Four-armed titans with chitinous armor, infused with metallic compounds. Their deep purple skin and burning eyes struck terror into the hearts of all who beheld them. They were the embodiment of lethal perfection, their culture built entirely around a singular concept: strength above all else. Weakness, to a Thanril, was not merely a disadvantage. It was an abomination. Cathras Station hung in the neutral zone between three major galactic territories, a gleaming silver structure resembling a massive sea urchin, with habitat spines extending from a central core. The station served as an interspecies biomedical center, where creatures from across the cosmos could receive treatment under the Galactic Concorded's neutral protection. Its reputation had grown over decades for one specific reason: if you were dying and no one else would touch you, Cathros would take you in. Dr. Alara Miles stood at the observation window of her quarters, watching distant ships move like glowing fish against the velvet backdrop of space. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman with stern features, softened only by eyes that had seen too much suffering to remain completely hardened. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and the silver insignia of Chief Medical Officer gleamed on her white uniform coat. Alara had built her reputation on a simple, unwavering philosophy: every life deserved a chance. It was this belief that had drawn her to Cathros, where she could apply her expertise in xenobiology to save species that many considered too dangerous or too alien to be worth saving. Some called her reckless, others called her a saint. She considered herself neither, just a doctor doing her job. The emergency alert shattered the midnight quiet, its piercing tone causing Alara to jolt upright in bed. The AI's voice followed immediately, its calm delivery incongruous with the urgency of its message. Emergency medical alert. Critical trauma patient arriving in Bay 4. Species classification: Thanril. Condition: catastrophic. Sleep vanished instantly. Alara was on her feet, grabbing her medical coat before the announcement had even finished. A Thanril? Here! The implications raced through her mind as she sprinted toward the medical deck. The Thanril rarely left their territory, and they never sought medical attention from other species. To do so would be to admit weakness, and in their culture, death was preferable to such humiliation. The corridors blurred around her as she ran, her mind already assembling the fragments of knowledge she had about Thanril physiology, quantum neural pathways, regenerative tissues unlike any other species, bioluminescent organs that functioned as secondary processing units, and a profound biological resilience that made them nearly impossible to kill. Which meant that whatever had happened to this Thanril, it must be truly catastrophic. The medical team was already assembled when she arrived at Bay 4, a diverse collection of species united by the universal symbols of medicine on their uniforms. Chief Physician Kalen, a tall Vesperian with reflective eyes, approached her immediately. "Dr. Miles," he said, his voice a soft whisper that nonetheless carried perfectly. "The ship is docking now. Are you certain about this? The Thanril Collective has strict protocols regarding intervention in their biological affairs." "We're a medical station, Kalen," Alara replied, checking the diagnostic equipment. "We don't turn away patients because of politics." "This isn't just politics," Kalen insisted. "The Collective considers any attempt to save a dying Thanril to be a cultural violation. They believed their warriors should either triumph or perish with dignity. Before Alara could respond, the bay doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The Thanril vessel that entered was not what she had expected. Rather than one of their fearsome warships, this was a small scout craft, its hull scorched and damaged in multiple places. It bore battle scars that told a story of desperate escape. The vessel's hatch opened, revealing two Thanril warriors. One remained standing, supporting the other, who was clearly the patient, even injured and barely conscious. The wounded Thanril was an intimidating sight, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 muscular arms ending in clawed hands. Its chitinous armor gleamed with a metallic sheen, despite being covered in a viscous purple fluid. Thanril blood. "This is Karzul," the standing Thanril announced, its voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate the very air. "High Hunter of the Seventh Claw. He was ambushed by Vorax raiders in the Cygnus Drift. Against my advice, he ordered me to bring him here." Alara stepped forward, already scanning the patient with her diagnostic tool. "Put him on the medical platform. We need to stabilize him immediately." The wounded Thanril, Karzul, suddenly straightened, his burning eyes focusing on Alara with surprising clarity given his condition. "No. Interventions," he growled, purple blood dripping from his mandibles. "Observation. Only." Alara met his gaze without flinching. "You're losing critical biofluids and your quantum neural network is showing severe degradation. Without intervention, you will die within hours." "Then, I die," Karzul responded, his voice gurgling with fluid. "As befits a warrior." The standing Thanril released his grip, allowing Karzul to stand on his own, a remarkable feat given his injuries. "I have fulfilled my duty by bringing you here, High Hunter. The choice is now yours." With that, the uninjured Thanril turned and retreated to the ship, sealing the hatch behind him. The vessel departed moments later, leaving Karzul alone with the medical team. Alara watched as Karzul swayed on his feet, struggling to remain standing. Pride, she realized, was literally killing him before her eyes. The Thanril culture's obsession with strength had brought this powerful warrior to a point where he would rather die than accept help. "Medical team, prepare for emergency treatment," she ordered, motioning for the anti-gravity stretcher. Karzul growled, a sound that sent several staff members backing away involuntarily. "I forbid it." "You came to a medical station," Alara countered, not intimidating. "That suggests you want to live." "I came to die with witnesses," Karzul managed to say before his legs finally gave out. He collapsed to the deck with a thunderous impact, his massive body shuddering as internal systems began to fail. Nurse Rix Crenshaw, the station's biochemistry specialist, rushed forward with a scanner. "Quantum cellular collapse accelerating. He's going into systemic shock." Alara made her decision in that moment. A decision that would either save a life or potentially endanger the entire station. Move him to Isolation Theater 1. Full quarantine protocols. No communications in or out. Chief Physician Kalen grabbed her arm. "Dr. Miles, I must formally protest. The Thanril Collective will view this as a violation of their sovereignty." "Noted," Alara replied, pulling free of his grip. "But I'm not going to stand here and watch a patient die because of cultural stubbornness. If he wants to die afterward, that's his choice. But he's getting treatment first." The anti-gravity stretcher hummed as they guided Karzul's massive form onto it, his body now trembling with involuntary spasms as his neural pathways began to misfire. The medical team moved quickly, transferring him to the isolation theater, a specialized chamber designed to contain the most dangerous or contagious patients. Inside the theater, Alara initiated the quarantine protocols, sealing the room from the outside world. The lighting shifted to a cool blue as the advanced medical systems came online, scanners mapping Karzul's internal structures in real time. Biometric profile established. The medical AI announced. Warning. Patient physiology contains multiple unknown structures and energy signatures. Treatment recommendations will be limited. Alara studied the holographic display showing Karzul's internal systems. The damage was even worse than she had initially suspected. Whatever weapon the Vorax raiders had used, it had disrupted the quantum coherence of his neural pathways, causing cascading failures throughout his body. His legendary regenerative abilities were actually working against him now, as confused tissues attempted to rebuild themselves in distorted patterns. "We need to stabilize the quantum neural network before we can address the physical trauma," she said, already preparing a specialized nanoprobe. "Nurse Crenshaw, prepare a targeted quantum stabilizer. Dr. Saren Lowe, I need you to monitor his secondary processing organs. We can't let them collapse while we work on the primary systems." Karzul's eyes snapped open as she approached with the nanoprobe, burning with a mixture of pain and defiance. With surprising speed for his condition, one of his upper arms shot out, grabbing her wrist in a grip that could have easily crushed bone had he been at full strength. "No, intervention," he hissed again, though the words were weaker now. "Let me die." Alara looked directly into those burning eyes, refusing to show fear. "You came to my station, warrior. That means you're my patient, and I don't let my patients die without a fight." Something flickered in Karzul's gaze. Surprise, perhaps, at her boldness. His grip loosened slightly, though whether from weakening strength or a change of heart, Alara couldn't tell. The moment was interrupted by an alert on the communication system. "Incoming transmission from the Thanril Collective," the AI announced. "Priority 1. Alara hesitated only briefly. "Maintain quarantine. No communications in or out until the patient is stabilized." "Dr. Miles." Chief Physician Kalen's voice came through the speaker, urgency evident in his tone. "The Collective is threatening military action if we interfere with their warrior's honorable death. This is escalating beyond a medical situation." "Then handle the diplomacy, Kalen," Alara replied sharply. "I'll handle the medicine. Miles out." She cut the communication and turned back to her patient, whose condition was deteriorating rapidly. The monitors showed accelerating neural degradation, and his massive body was now racked with spasms as competing systems failed and misfired. For the next hour, Alara and her team worked frantically to stabilize Karzul, administering targeted quantum treatments designed to halt the degradation of his neural pathways. The Thanril's physiology resisted their efforts at every turn, not just due to the damage, but almost as if his body itself was programmed to reject outside intervention. "It's not working," Dr. Saren Lowe reported, frustration evident in her voice. "The quantum stabilizers are being rejected faster than we can apply them. His system identifies them as foreign invaders." Alara studied the readings, her mind racing through alternatives. "We need to synchronize with his quantum signature, recalibrate the stabilizers to match his neural frequency." "That's never been done with a Thanril before," Nurse Crenshaw objected. "We don't have established protocols." "Then we'll make new ones," Alara insisted, already adjusting the equipment settings. "His biology may be different, but the quantum principles are universal." As they worked, Karzul's consciousness ebbed and flowed, moments of lucidity punctuated by periods of delirium. During one such moment of clarity, his burning gaze fixed on Alara with unexpected intensity. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible now. "Why fight for me?" Alara continued working as she answered, not looking up from her task. "Because that's what I do. I fight for life, no matter whose it is." A low sound emanated from Karzul, something that might have been a laugh in a less dire situation. "Thanril, fight for death. You, fight for life. Strange. Opponents." "We don't have to be opponents," Alara replied, finally meeting his gaze. "Right now, we could be allies against death itself." Karzul's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but something shifted in his burning gaze. Before he could respond, however, his body convulsed violently as another system cascade began. Quantum neural collapse accelerating, the medical AI announced dispassionately. Estimated time to terminal failure, 26 minutes. The next 20 minutes were a desperate race against time, as Alara and her team tried everything in their considerable arsenal to halt the degradation. Traditional methods failed one after another, forcing them to improvise treatments that had never been attempted on a Thanril before. With less than 5 minutes remaining on the countdown, Alara stood over Karzul, exhaustion and frustration etched into her features. The proud warrior was now barely conscious, his once powerful body betrayed by failing systems. She had never lost a patient without exhausting every possible option, but they were rapidly running out of alternatives. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, more to herself than to the dying Thanril. "I don't know what else to try." As if roused by her words, Karzul's eyes flickered open once more, finding her face. Something had changed in that burning gaze. The defiance was still there, but now mixed with something else, something that no human had likely ever seen in a Thanril before: vulnerability. His mandibles moved, but no sound emerged. Alara leaned closer, trying to catch whatever he was attempting to say. When the word finally came, it was so faint that she almost missed it. A single word that defied everything she knew about Thanril culture. "Please." The word hung in the air between them, more shocking than if he had suddenly roared back to full health. Thanril did not ask for help. They did not say, "please." It was anathema to their entire cultural identity. Yet, he had said it. And in that moment, Alara understood what it had cost him, far more than physical pain. He had broken a cultural taboo so profound that it would likely make him an outcast among his own kind, if they ever learned of it. But he had said it nonetheless. "Quantum neural collapse in 2 minutes, the AI reminded them, its tone still infuriatingly calm. Alara's resolve hardened instantly. "Seal all external communications. Full security lockdown on this room. What happens here stays here until I say otherwise." Her team looked at her with a mixture of concern and determination as they realized what she was proposing. They would violate Thanril cultural protocols, potentially triggering a diplomatic incident or worse. But they would do it to save a life. Dr. Saren Lowe, reconfigure the quantum restructuring device for total neural pattern replication. Nurse Crenshaw, prepare a full biomatrix stabilization field. We're going to attempt a complete quantum neural reset. The procedure she was proposing had never been attempted on any species, let alone a Thanril. It would essentially capture Karzul's quantum neural pattern, the equivalent of his consciousness, hold it in a buffer while they reset his failing neural pathways, then reintegrate the pattern into the stabilized system. In theory, it could work. In practice, it was as likely to kill him instantly as it was to save him. As the team rushed to prepare the equipment, Alara leaned close to Karzul, who had slipped back into semi-consciousness. "You asked for help," she said quietly. "Now, I need you to fight with me. Your strength, my knowledge, together." The Thanril's eyes flickered, and one of his hands moved slightly, not to grab or threaten, but in what she interpreted as acknowledgement. "Neural collapse imminent," the AI warned. 60 seconds remaining. The quantum restructuring device hummed to life, its crystalline components glowing with energy, as it prepared to capture the most complex neural pattern it had ever encountered. The biomatrix field generators created a shimmering cocoon around Karzul's massive form, isolating him from external interference. "Ready on your mark, Dr. Miles," Dr. Saren Lowe reported, her fingers poised over the control interface. Alara took a deep breath, acutely aware that she was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. "Initiate neural pattern capture." The quantum device emitted a high-pitched whine as it engaged, sending invisible tendrils of energy through Karzul's neural pathways, mapping and storing the impossibly complex pattern that made him who he was. On the monitors, his neural activity spiked dramatically, then began to stabilize as the device took over the function of his failing systems. Pattern capture at 60%, Dr. Saren Lowe reported. Neural degradation temporarily halted. Neural collapse countdown suspended, the AI confirmed. Alara allowed herself a moment of relief before focusing on the next, even more dangerous phase. Prepare for neural reset. On my mark, drop the quantum buffers and initiate total pathway reconstruction. This was the critical moment. They would essentially erase Karzul's neural system and rebuild it from scratch. Then, attempt to reintegrate his stored consciousness. If any part of the process failed, the result would be either death or a vegetative state. Buffers ready, Nurse Crenshaw confirmed. Pathway reconstruction sequences programmed. Alara placed her hand on Karzul's arm, a gesture of connection that felt important, though she couldn't have explained why. Mark. The biomatrix field flared blindingly bright as the reconstruction process began, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The monitoring systems went haywire, alarms blaring as they lost connection with the patient's vital signs. For a terrifying 30 seconds, they worked blind, trusting the automated systems to execute the program sequences. When the light finally dimmed enough to see the monitors again, they showed a flat line across all neural functions. No neural activity detected, the AI announced, its voice seeming louder in the sudden silence. Alara's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain focused. Initiate pattern reintegration. Maximum synchronization priority. The quantum device engaged once more, transferring the stored neural pattern back into the reset pathways. On the monitors, nothing changed at first. The flat line remained unbroken, mocking their efforts. Then, almost imperceptibly, a tiny spike appeared, then another, and another. Neural activity detected, the AI confirmed. Pattern reintegration in progress. The team watched in tense silence as the neural activity slowly increased, the pattern growing more complex with each passing moment. It was working. The reset pathways were accepting the reintegrated consciousness. But was it enough? Had they acted in time to prevent permanent damage? Minutes stretched into an hour as they monitored the process, making minute adjustments to facilitate the reintegration. Gradually, other systems began to show signs of recovery as the restored neural network reasserted control over Karzul's body. 2 hours after the procedure began, Alara finally allowed herself to believe they had succeeded. The monitors showed stable neural activity, and the regenerative tissues were now functioning correctly, repairing the physical damage that had been wrought. "I think we did it," Nurse Crenshaw said quietly, as if afraid to jinx their success. Alara nodded, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her as the adrenaline faded. "Maintain the biomatrix field for another 6 hours. I want continuous monitoring. Alert me immediately if there's any sign of neural degradation." "What about the Thanril Collective?" Dr. Saren Lowe asked. "They've been demanding updates for hours. Tell them the patient is in isolation and unstable." Alara replied, "That's not even a lie. I'll deal with the diplomatic fallout after we're sure he's going to recover." As the team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Alara remained by Karzul's side, watching the steady rise and fall of his massive chest. They had crossed a line today, violated cultural protocols, and risked interstellar incident to save one life. Had it been worth it? Only time would tell. For 3 days, Karzul remained in a stable but unconscious state, his body's remarkable regenerative abilities now working properly to repair the extensive damage. Alara maintained the quarantine, limiting knowledge of the procedure to only those who had been present. The Thanril Collective continued to demand information, their messages growing increasingly threatening as time passed. On the 4th day, Alara was reviewing the latest neural scans when she heard a sound from the bed, a low, rumbling growl that instantly commanded attention. She turned to find Karzul's burning eyes, open and fixed directly on her. "You should be dead," she said matter-of-factly, approaching the bed without hesitation. "By all medical understanding of your species, and certainly by your own cultural standards." The Thanril regarded her silently for a long moment, his expression unreadable to human eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was stronger than she had expected, though still lacking its former power. "Yet I live," he stated, the words carrying a weight that suggested he was still processing this reality himself. "You do," Alara confirmed, checking his vital signs. "Thanks to a procedure that had never been attempted before and violated about a dozen of your cultural taboos." Karzul's 4 hands clenched simultaneously, a gesture she interpreted as tension. "You ignored my directive." "You said please," she countered, meeting his gaze directly. "That overrode your previous directives." Something that might have been surprise flickered in those burning eyes. "You understood the significance." "I understood that it cost you more to say that word than it cost me to save your life," Alara replied. "I wasn't going to dishonor that sacrifice by letting you die anyway." Karzul was silent again, his gaze shifting to examine the medical equipment surrounding him, then the room, and finally, his own body. One hand moved to touch the healing wounds on his chest, now covered with regenerated tissue. "The quantum neural reset," he said, surprising her with his knowledge. "You captured my consciousness while rebuilding my neural pathways." "You were aware of that?" Alara asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Not consciously," Karzul admitted. "But the procedure left echoes, impressions. I can sense what was done." He shifted on the bed, attempting to sit up. Alara moved to assist him, then stopped herself. A Thanril warrior would likely consider such help another insult to his strength. To her surprise, Karzul extended one of his lower arms, accepting the support. Once upright, he regarded her with renewed intensity. "The collective knows nothing of this procedure." "No," Alara confirmed. "We've maintained quarantine. As far as they know, you're still in critical condition with an uncertain prognosis." Karzul nodded slowly. "Good. That gives us time." "Time for what?" Alara asked cautiously. "To determine how I will exist now," the Thanril replied, his tone grave. "I have violated the most sacred tenet of our culture by asking for help. By your intervention, I have survived what should have been an honorable death. I cannot return to my former place." Alara frowned. "You would have died needlessly. There's no honor in that." "Honor is defined differently among the Thanril," Karzul explained, though without the condescension she might have expected. "Strength is everything. To admit weakness, to require aid, these are considered failures of spirit, not merely of body." "And yet you asked for help," Alara pointed out. Karzul's gaze dropped for the first time, a gesture that seemed profoundly significant. "I did. In that moment, the will to live overcame the will to honor tradition. I must now live with that choice." Before Alara could respond, the communication system chimed urgently. "Dr. Miles," Chief Physician Kalen's voice came through, tension evident in his tone. "A Thanril vessel has just docked. Lieutenant Voss of the Collective demands to see the patient immediately. I've tried to explain the quarantine protocols, but he's threatening to forcibly enter the isolation area." Karzul's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with renewed intensity. "Voss! Of course they would send him." "I take it you know this, Lieutenant?" Alara asked, already moving to secure the isolation room's access points. "He is an enforcer of traditions," Karzul explained grimly. "His role is to ensure that no Thanril strays from our cultural path. If he suspects what has happened here, he will not hesitate to eliminate everyone involved, including you and your team." Alara's hand paused over the security control panel. And you? What would he do to you? Public execution, Karzul stated flatly. To serve as an example to any who might consider following my path of weakness. The implications were clear. Everything they had done to save Karzul's life could still end in death. Not just for him, but for everyone who had participated in the procedure. Then we need a plan, Alara said decisively. One that satisfies the collective while keeping everyone alive. Karzul's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. You continue to surprise me, human. Most species would be paralyzed with fear at the prospect of Thanril retribution. Fear doesn't save lives, Alara replied simply. Action does. Now, what does this Lieutenant Voss expect to find here? A warrior who either died honorably or will die soon, Karzul said. Anything else will raise suspicion. Alara considered this for a moment, then nodded. Then that's what he'll see. Lie back down and let me make some adjustments to the monitoring systems. For the next 10 minutes, they worked quickly to create a convincing illusion of a critically ill Thanril warrior. Alara manipulated the biometric displays to show degraded neural patterns, while Karzul positioned himself to appear weakened but dignified, a warrior facing death with appropriate stoicism. When Lieutenant Voss finally entered the isolation chamber, flanked by 2 armed Thanril guards, the scene was set. Alara stood by the bedside, maintaining a professional demeanor, despite the intimidating presence of 3 fully armed Thanril warriors in her medical facility. Lieutenant Voss was every bit as imposing as Karzul, though his chitinous armor bore different markings, symbols of authority rather than battle honors. His burning gaze swept the room, taking in the medical equipment and the apparently weakened form of Karzul, before settling on Alara. You are the human who has interfered in Thanril affairs, he stated, his deep voice vibrating with barely contained hostility. I am Dr. Alara Miles, Chief Medical Officer of Kethros Station, she replied evenly. And I have provided medical care to a patient who arrived seeking treatment. Voss's upper arms flexed, a gesture of dismissal. Karzul is a high hunter of the 7th Claw. His life and death belong to the collective, not to your primitive medical practices. From the bed, Karzul spoke, his voice deliberately weakened, but still carrying authority. I chose to come here, Voss. The decision was mine. The lieutenant's attention shifted to Karzul, his expression hardening. A decision that dishonors the collective. You should have died in battle, not lingered in this facility. I still fight, Karzul responded, managing to infuse the words with defiance. Death has not claimed me yet. Voss approached the bed, studying Karzul with critical intensity. What interventions have been performed? Before Alara could respond, Karzul spoke again. Observation only. As I commanded, the human has respected our ways. The lie hung in the air, a dangerous gambit that depended entirely on Voss's inability to detect the true extent of Karzul's recovery beneath the facade they had created. Lieutenant Voss studied the biometric displays. His knowledge of human medical technology clearly limited, but his suspicion evident. These readings indicate imminent neural collapse. Yes, Alara confirmed, maintaining her professional demeanor. The damage from the Vorax weapons has created a cascading failure in his quantum neural network. We've been monitoring the progression, but without intervention, the outcome is inevitable. As it should be, Voss stated coldly. A warrior earns life through strength or embraces death through honor. There is no middle path. He turned his burning gaze back to Karzul. The collective acknowledges your service, High Hunter. Your battle honors will be recorded in the ancestral archives. Your death will be witnessed. With that, he gestured to one of the guards, who produced a small, crystalline device and placed it near the bed. This will record your final moments for the collective. Karzul inclined his head in acknowledgement, maintaining the charade of a proud warrior accepting his fate. "I am honored." Lieutenant Voss studied him for a moment longer, then turned to Alara. "You will not interfere further. When death comes, it will come without your human medicines. Is this understood?" Alara met his gaze without flinching. "My duty is to respect my patient's wishes. If Karzul has refused intervention, I am bound by medical ethics to honor that decision." The careful phrasing of her response wasn't lost on Voss, whose eyes narrowed slightly. But after a moment, he seemed satisfied. "The collective will maintain a presence on this station until the matter is concluded. We will be watching." With that ominous warning, he and his guards departed, leaving the recording device behind, a silent witness that complicated their situation enormously. As soon as the door sealed behind the Thanril delegation, Alara moved to examine the recording device. "This changes things." Karzul pushed himself back to a sitting position, his movements now revealing their true strength. "Yes, Voss suspects something, or he wouldn't have left the recorder. It will transmit continuously to the collective ship." "Can we disable it?" Alara asked. "Not without alerting them immediately," Karzul replied. "It contains quantum entanglement components that would register any tampering." Alara considered their options, none of which seemed particularly promising. "So we have a choice. Maintain this charade indefinitely, which isn't sustainable, or reveal the truth and face the consequences." "There is a third option," Karzul said, his tone thoughtful. "One that requires courage from both of us." Over the next hour, they formulated a plan, one that walked a dangerous line between Thanril tradition and the new reality they had created. It would require perfect timing, convincing performances, and a willingness to challenge centuries of Thanril cultural doctrine. For 2 more days, they maintained the illusion for the benefit of the recording device and the Thanril observers on the station. Karzul appeared to weaken gradually, while actually growing stronger as his natural regenerative abilities continued to repair the remaining damage. Alara coordinated with her team in secret, preparing the specialized equipment they would need and ensuring that everyone understood their roles in the plan. The stakes couldn't have been higher, not just for Karzul and the medical team, but potentially for interspecies relations throughout the sector. On the morning of the 3rd day, they put their plan into action. Alara entered the isolation chamber with her full medical team, making no attempt to hide their presence from the recording device. Karzul lay on the bed, appearing to be in the final stages of neural collapse, a carefully choreographed performance that the biometric monitors supported with falsified readings. "Neural cascade has reached critical threshold," Nurse Crenshaw announced loudly for the benefit of the recorder. "Estimated time to complete neural failure, 14 minutes. Alara approached the bed, maintaining a professional demeanor, despite the tension coursing through her. "Hi, Hunter Karzul. You are entering the final phase of neural collapse. Do you maintain your directive for non-intervention?" Karzul's eyes flickered open, burning with an intensity that could easily be mistaken for the final defiance of a dying warrior. "I do," as they had planned. Dr. Seren-Lo moved to adjust one of the monitoring devices, accidentally disrupting the recorder's line of sight for a crucial moment. In that brief window, Alara slipped Karzul a small device, which he concealed within his hand. The plan proceeded with precise timing. As the countdown to supposed neural failure reached 5 minutes, Lieutenant Voss and his guards entered the chamber, coming to witness the honorable death of a Thanril warrior, as tradition demanded. "The collective acknowledges your strength. High Hunter," Voss intoned formally. "Your battle with death has been worthy of your rank." Karzul acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head, then turned his gaze to Alara. "Doctor, approach." Alara stepped forward, aware of the intense scrutiny from both Voss and the recording device. "Yes. Hi, Hunter." What happened next was a carefully orchestrated moment that appeared spontaneous to all observers. Karzul activated the concealed device, causing the biometric monitors to spike dramatically, as if his neural network was experiencing a sudden, catastrophic failure. His body convulsed convincingly, four arms rigid with apparent agony. Thanril must evolve, or perish, he gasped, loud enough for all to hear. The strength to accept aid is greater than the strength to die alone. With those heretical words hanging in the air, he appeared to lose consciousness, the monitors displaying the chaotic patterns of a complete neural shutdown. Lieutenant Voss stiffened, clearly shocked by both the words and the sudden collapse. "What is happening?" "Total neural cascade," Alara reported urgently. "We're losing him." She turned to her team, giving the signal they had been waiting for. "Emergency Protocol Alpha, prepare the quantum restructuring device." Before Voss could intervene, the medical team sprang into action, moving with practiced efficiency to position the equipment around Karzul's bed. The isolation chamber, filled with the hum of advanced technology, powering up. "Stop this immediately!" Voss commanded, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. "You will not interfere with his honorable death." Alara positioned herself between Voss and the bed, her expression resolute. "He just publicly declared his wish to evolve beyond your traditions. As his medical provider, I am bound to honor his final request." "This violates everything the Thanril stand for," Voss growled, the guards beside him tensing for action. "Perhaps what the Thanril stand for is changing," Alara challenged. "Your traditions evolved once. They can evolve again. Now step aside or be responsible for defying a High Hunter's last command." It was a dangerous gambit, leveraging Thanril respect for hierarchy against their cultural taboos. For a tense moment, the situation balanced on a knife's edge, with violence seeming inevitable. Then, unexpectedly, one of Voss's guards spoke. The High Hunter's words were clear. "Lieutenant." He spoke of evolution. Voss turned sharply, clearly surprised by this breach of protocol from a subordinate. "You dare question?" "Not questioning," the guard clarified quickly. "Witnessing, as is our duty." The second guard nodded in agreement. The recorder captured his declaration. The collective will hear his words. Caught between Thanril respect for authority and adherence to tradition, Voss hesitated just long enough for the medical team to activate the quantum restructuring device. The chamber filled with a brilliant blue light as the procedure began, this time as a performance rather than an actual intervention, though none but Alara and her team knew this. For the next hour, they maintained the elaborate charade, making a show of fighting for Karzul's life, while he lay seemingly unconscious, but actually fully aware and controlling his own vital signs to match the falsified readings on the monitors. Finally, as the procedure appeared to reach its climax, Alara stepped back from the bed, her expression carefully crafted to show equal parts relief and amazement. Neural pattern stabilizing, quantum coherence restored. He's coming back. On cue. Karzul's eyes opened, burning with a vitality that couldn't be faked. He rose from the bed with deliberate slowness, as if testing limbs that had nearly failed him, and fixed his gaze on the stunned Lieutenant Voss. "I have looked into the void between life and death," he stated, his voice resonating with power that had been absent during his performance of weakness. "And I have chosen life, not through weakness, but through the greatest strength of all, the courage to change." Voss seemed at a loss for words, his cultural conditioning warring with the evidence before his eyes. Finally, he managed to speak. "The collective will not accept this." "The collective will see the recording," Karzul countered. "They will hear my declaration, and they will decide whether the future of our species lies in rigid adherence to the past or in the strength to evolve." He turned to Alara, And what happened next shocked everyone present. Karzul, High Hunter of the Seventh Claw, one of the most honored warriors of the Thanril Collective, inclined his head to her in a gesture of respect. "This human fought death itself to honor my request," he announced, ensuring the recorder captured every word. "She has shown strength worthy of a Thanril. By the ancient law of the blood debt, I bind myself to her service until the debt is repaid." The blood debt, a concept so archaic that even Voss seemed surprised to hear it invoked. It dated back to the earliest days of Thanril culture, before their rise to galactic dominance, when warriors would pledge themselves to those who saved their lives in battle. "You cannot invoke the blood debt to an alien," Voss protested, though with less conviction than before. "I just did," Karzul replied simply. "And the recorder has witnessed it. Will you defy ancient law, Lieutenant?" The trap was perfectly laid. If Voss rejected the blood debt, he would be the one violating Thanril tradition. If he accepted it, he would be acknowledging the legitimacy of Karzul's choice and Alara's intervention. After a long, tense silence, Voss finally inclined his head slightly, not in respect, but in acknowledgement of a battle well fought. "The Collective will review this matter. Until then, the blood debt stands as witnessed." With that grudging concession, he retrieved the recording device and departed with his guards, leaving Alara and Karzul alone in the isolation chamber. As soon as the door sealed behind them, Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That was too close. Karzul's posture relaxed slightly, though his burning gaze remained fixed on the door. "The battle is not over. Voss will return to the Collective with the recording, and they will debate its meaning. Some will call for my execution despite the blood debt. Others will see the potential for evolution that I spoke of." "And which side will win?" Alara asked. "That depends on what happens next," Karzul replied, turning his attention back to her. "The blood debt was not merely a tactical move. Dr. Miles, I meant what I said. You fought for my life when I could not. By the oldest laws of my people, I am bound to you until that debt is repaid." Alara studied him thoughtfully. "And how is such a debt repaid?" "Traditionally, by saving the life of the one to whom the debt is owed," Karzul explained. "But in this case, I believe the debt extends beyond a single life. You risked not only your career, but potentially the safety of your entire station to uphold your medical oath. Such a debt requires more than a simple life-for-life exchange." He moved to the observation window, his massive form silhouetted against the stars. "The Thanril have existed in isolation for too long, believing our strength made us superior to all other species. Perhaps it is time we learned that true strength comes in many forms." "Including the strength to ask for help when needed," Alara suggested, joining him at the window. "Yes," Karzul acknowledged. "That lesson nearly cost me my life. Thanks to you, I have a chance to ensure it does not cost others theirs." The days that followed brought significant changes to both Cathro Station and the broader interstellar community. As Karzul had predicted, the Thanril Collective was divided by the recording of his declaration and the invocation of the blood debt. After much debate, they issued a formal statement acknowledging the validity of the ancient law while establishing new protocols for medical intervention in extreme circumstances. Lieutenant Voss was reassigned to the outer territories, his rigid adherence to tradition seen as a potential liability in the evolving relationship between the Thanril and other species. In his place, the Collective sent a diplomatic representative to Cathro Station, the first such appointment in their history. For Alara and her team, the aftermath brought both recognition and scrutiny. The quantum neural reset procedure they had pioneered was documented and shared throughout the medical community, though with appropriate cautions about its experimental nature. Requests for treatment at Cathro Station increased dramatically as word spread of their willingness to attempt the impossible. And through it all, Karzul remained, not as a patient, but as an ally. True to his word, He bound himself to Alara's service, though she quickly made it clear that she considered him a colleague rather than a subordinate. Together, they began to explore the possibilities of combining Thanril biological knowledge with human medical techniques, creating new treatments that neither species could have developed alone. 6 months after the fateful night when a damaged Thanril scout craft had limped into Kuthro Station, Alara found Karzul in the research laboratory they now shared, studying the results of their latest experiment in quantum tissue regeneration. "The preliminary tests are promising," she said, reviewing the data over his shoulder. "If we can stabilize the quantum field, this could revolutionize treatment for neural injuries across multiple species." Karzul nodded, his burning eyes focused on the holographic display. "The collective has requested permission to send researchers to observe our work. It seems your influence extends beyond this station now." Alara smiled slightly. "Our influence? You mean none of this would have happened if you hadn't had the courage to say one word?" The Thanril turned to face her, his expression solemn. "And none of it would have happened if you hadn't had the courage to listen. In the vastness of interstellar space, where countless species had risen and fallen across millennia, one truth remained constant: the strong survived. But perhaps, as Karzul and Alara were discovering, the definition of strength was evolving, from the power to stand alone to the wisdom of standing together. And it had all begun with a single word, whispered in a moment of desperate truth: "Please."